we are live. Live, local, late breaking. I just got
POLYGON Issuance number 51 on this Wednesday, March 18th, 2015. The first Wednesday show we've ever done. So,
and it could be the last Wednesday show we ever do.
Yeah, I'm on spring break this week, so it just fits in perfectly with Jeff, so... Hey, whenever we can fit people in, that's what counts.
No. Before we go any further, I'll tell the audience that Henry wouldn't have been on Friday if we had done the show on Friday, because he's going to go to the house on the rock,
AKA in the middle of nowhere.
I'm calling it for him the House of Boredom. So.
Yeah, the nearest McDonald's, I think. How far was it away, Jeff?
Like 40 or 45 miles.
40 or 45 miles, which is a bit hard on me because I usually go out with my friends every Saturday to get McDonald's. So I mean, it's gonna be pretty hard to go a week without McDonald's. So I'm just saying.
You realize, thinking about that, Henry, with the forecast being that it's going to get quite interesting, you may be coming back from there in a snowstorm.
Oh, yeah.
On Sunday.
I think Monday, yeah. We'll see how that goes. Models have been a bit sketchy.
Yeah, we're going to have to talk about that later. But I want... It's not as warm as it was last week. Yeah, but it's normal, so at least there's no wildfires and red flag warnings and extreme fire.
I will say, I did hear before I left the house earlier, fire department here got called out to a controlled burn, which was no longer being controlled.
Yeah, that
supposedly controlled.
I think the problem is that, and they did a story on this a few days ago, back when it was really hot, the day it was like 80 something. And if you're going to do a controlled burn, you're supposed to call the fire department to tell them you're going to do one, so then they know if it gets out of control, they know where to go. And that one day when it was in the 80s and the wind was blowing 30 and 40 miles an hour, there was a lot of these controlled burns that were going out of control. And the thing is, and people would say, well, why are they doing these controlled burns when it's this hot and dry? And the thing is, in the spring, you typically want to do these controlled, to burn all the old stuff from last fall, because the best time to do it is after the snow is melted and before it really starts to get rainy and mucky again. Well, and that window is so small that you have to do it when everything's dried out, so you can get everything burned, so then everything can grow back again. Kind of like the old days when you'd have these, back in the olden days, when you'd have these prairie fires. Most of them were typically in the spring and early summer, and then everything would be burned out, and it would lead to regrowth. Derek, our garden expert, would love me talking about that, but I digress. Henry, introduce our guest before he decides he doesn't want to talk about prairies and whatnot.
Well, I'll let you introduce them.
Okay, I'll introduce him.
Go from there.
The bearded gentleman in between us, I think he grows it to make himself look old. But
I think you should go for the James Harden look. I mean, a big beard like him. I mean,
okay.
It has been longer. It's shorter now. We're getting a little out of winter, but you know those deep winter months down here in Kansas City. You know, we gotta a little bit more to keep warm. So.
No, he did it because he was in that oh gosh, what is it? That thing in November where you don't shave. Oh God, what is it called? Something I can't remember what it is, but a lot of people do in November. They grow their beards out for like charity or something. I can't remember what it is, but that's what I was thinking of. So anyway, Jason Prentice is on. Originally from Iowa, near Spencer, in Terrell, whatever. I'll mispronounce it, but that's where he's from. And I note the day he left Iowa, it was way below zero, and he's never lived in the States since. And which is interesting because that could have been about every winter. So he now works at Whether or Not, which is weather consulting and some other stuff that's based in Kansas City, and it has a group of quite a number of meteorologists and whatnot that do a lot of work in that field. So we'll get into that later, but first we're going to get into Jason about how he got into weather, and was he interested in it, and was there any event that got him interested in weather? Before he actually tells us hi and then introduces himself some more.
Well, I think he did a good job introducing me. It is pronounced Terrell, so he had it right the first time there. And that's actually grew up outside of town there, so I'm rural Iowa all the way. Grew up on an acreage, everything else. So I always like to say, people consider it middle of nowhere. I always tell them that I'd drive at least a half hour to get to any sort of Walmart, so that's usually a pretty good indicator that I was definitely out there in the rural area. As far as how I got started in weather, really like a lot of people, I traced it clear back in elementary school. One of the first things I remember doing on weather was my second grade diary project, which instead of keeping track of anything interesting, I just kept track of daily weather, whether it was sunny or cloudy, what the high temperature, low temperature was. If we had any rain, I used the rain gauge and measured out how much precip we had. So that was kind of my first true thing that I knew I was really interested in weather. Any individual event, I don't really have an individual one that really sticks out. First tornado that I saw was actually a nighttime one. It's traveling north of us. Well, it's probably about 10, 12 miles. And actually could see it illuminated by lightning up to the north. I didn't really manage to hit anything, so it was a EF0 if it was even on the ground at all. At that point, 10 miles away, you couldn't really tell if it was on the ground or not. But that was the first probably true weather event that I can vividly remember. Dad and I standing towards the end of the driveway watching up to the north, which, plenty of people can ask what a second grader, first grader is out doing outside with his dad in the middle of a thunderstorm. But, that's how you get started in weather is, being outside and enjoying all that it has to offer.
So which is interesting because I'd get into the fact of how many tornadoes have you seen in your entire lifetime? Because you did do some chasing for a time.
Yeah, I did quite a bit of chasing. Junior year of high school onward through graduating college and being forced into the real world and having a job and everything there. But actually chased a couple of years with Twist X, which was Tim Samaras' group. We managed a couple of really good days in Kansas where we saw more than a dozen tornadoes there. Overall, I don't really know if I have a hard count as far as tornadoes seen, but it's above 50. It's in that range in there. And by and large, those all came in about a 7-year span. So I had a couple of good years in there. Obviously, last couple of years now, working, having kids, everything else, don't really do a whole lot of chasing anymore. It's also being in the weather business usually can limit your chasing quite a bit because usually if there's severe weather, it's in the office and doing all that fun stuff too. So I did quite a bit of chasing. Like I said, calmed down quite a bit. We'll see if kids get older and everything else, we may make it more of a family venture again and head out and get back into things. So.
Oh, he's going to be one of these people that I've heard of this because I see old tornado chase videos, that the old VHS thing back when there was VHS. There'd be this. I always hear these stories about let's get in the family station wagon and go chase the tornado. And but I've heard these stories, and now Jason is going to be doing this. Oh, great! This is going to be good. I can't wait until Jason's wife starts screaming at him or something about a tornado.
She's been chasing with me before, so
at least she's used to it.
Yeah, she's experienced everything before, so obviously I'm on the safer side of things. I try not to drive into tornadoes or drive into the big hail or do anything too outrageous. But
no, just drive straight into the tornado and see what happens.
Yeah. So.
So, what do you think? Now, your kids are. I think the oldest is about to start elementary school or is in elementary school. I can't remember because they're all. Because I know you had your third about a year or so ago. So, do you think that you're gonna like ooze your meteorology energy to them, and they could get interested in it, or are you not sure yet because they're still so young?
We can always try. I have the 5-year-old he's going to be 6 here in May. He definitely has a little bit of an interest. I always ask him if he's afraid of the thunder or lightning, and he says no. And times when we've had thunderstorms, he's out looking out the window alongside me. He actually enjoys winter weather more than severe weather, I think. Anytime there's even a chance of snow and he sees snow falling from the sky, he's all excited about it. So hopefully we can at least get one of them to follow in a weather-related path. But as long as they end up choosing what they want to choose. So.
Now, you went to Iowa State, which is the school I went to but didn't graduate from. But so how was Iowa State in your time? Because you came after me.
I went to Iowa State in 2005 and 2009. It was meteorology the whole way, so took all my classes there. Experienced dorms and then apartments, everything else. So, I loved being at Iowa State. Great campus, plenty of great people. Love the meteorology department up there. It's not too small of an apartment, but it's small enough to where all the professors, all the professors know you. Nobody's too busy with research to help students out. Overall, anytime I get an opportunity to anybody asks me about meteorology schools, I'll definitely promote Iowa State as a good choice if you want to get into the field there. I haven't been back there in a while. Need to get back there more often. I'll be up there in Ankeny for the Severe Storms Doppler Radar Conference next week. Obviously, that's ran quite a bit by the Iowa State AMS. Central Iowa NWA puts it on, but a lot of those members are the same. So I look forward to seeing a few of the professors up there. Also get to know maybe a few of the students. Obviously, I've been gone long enough now to where I don't know anybody that's there anymore. First couple of years after you graduate, you can always see the names and everything else and know who they are. But now, see all the names and forecasting challenges and everything else, and don't know any of them. So,
if you had an option to go to either OU or ISU, which one would you pick?
Well, ultimately, that choice comes down to what you want to do. Obviously, if you're looking at severe weather research, there's no reason you don't go to Oklahoma. With SBC, NSSL, SIMS, all based out of there. There's too many opportunities if you want to do severe storms research to go there. Iowa State, in its right, has plenty of researchers that do good things with severe weather, albeit not necessarily as experimental basis as some of that NSSL and SIMS work goes with your DAOs and things like that. But overall, looking at the campuses and everything else, for me, Iowa State's a better fit. Like I said, it all comes down to what you want to go into, what you want to get out of college, and what type of atmosphere you're looking for.
So with your current work with Weather or Not, what's kind of your role there? What do you kind of do on your daily basis?
We're consulting meteorologists, so we're dealing with clients, giving site-specific forecasts for them based upon what their thresholds are, what they need to know. Obviously, a standard everyday forecast isn't going to tell you what time each sprinkles are going to be at. If it's occasional sprinkles throughout the day, well, that's good for general everyday person, but roofing companies, construction companies, they want to know, well, is it going to be 10 a.m. or noon? Is it going to be noon, 2 p.m.? Can they get full days of work in, or have to be cut off half a day? Even some things, if they can get 3 hours of work in before rain, like today was, they're fine with that. At the same time, we deal with a lot of events, Parks and Rec. We have Kansas City Royals as a client, so we deal with a lot of large venue stuff as well. So dealing with what time rain gets in the game, lightning concerns, all sorts of fun stuff. Winter time is a busy time for us. We have a lot of public works, snow removal companies, so dealing with what time snow is going to begin, how heavy snow is going to get. Something that a lot of people don't think of, that you don't hear a lot about, is road temperatures. That can be snowing but not accumulating on roads, and that's a big deal to public works and them and snow removals, because obviously they're not working at that point. But as soon as those roads dip below 32 degrees, you deal with ice issues, and that's when you start to see that snow accumulate. So consulting meteorology is a fun thing, really in depth. And obviously, it'd be stressful when you're dealing with winter storms, severe weather, but it's something. You're into operational meteorology. Probably not a better choice than to be a consulting meteorologist or weather service meteorologist to deal with all the types of weather and all the types of clients.
So the clients are pretty much wide-ranging from what I've seen. They, like you said, with the Royals, to say like road construction companies, because they would need it, like you kind of hinted at, if they're needing to do paving work, because as anybody would know, you have to pave at a certain temperature if it's asphalt or concrete, because if it's raining, then the asphalt or concrete could bubble and crack. So something like that would be very appropriate for that type stuff, for construction especially, because you don't want the roads to be crappy after they've done them.
Yeah, and especially when they're dealing with, it's a little bit different if you're pouring your own driveway compared to pouring an interstate or bridge work, stuff like that. They have pretty strict standards they have to adhere to, as far as the air temperatures have to be above a certain degree. Your concrete or your asphalt's got to be a certain mixture, specific quality. So weather can play a pretty big factor in that. If it's too cold, too hot, obviously if it's raining and stuff like that's a big deal. So lots of different variables that go into it, and something that they have to take into account. And obviously we send stuff to them. You talk on the phone quite a bit to certain clients. Whether they want to know what time the rain's getting there, when's the temperature going above a certain threshold. So plenty of communication skills needed, whether it's written or verbal, and basically you get to explain the weather and all its little intricacies every day.
So now I'm gonna have to think of a question again. Oh gosh, my mind has gone blank again. Oh, Henry, do you have anything while I think of something, or try to think?
Who's your favorite client to work with, do you think? I mean, what's the favorite part of the job that, or which client do you like working with best?
It all depends upon a situation. I mean, every client can be fun or stressful depending upon things, but typically the most fun to work with is your Kansas City Royals, the St. Louis Cardinals. It's always fun to see what you're telling them and how it affects something in real time. Obviously when a baseball game is going on, you tell them rain's going to be there in 15 minutes, rain's going to be there in 10 minutes, rain's going to be there in 5 minutes, and then they're pulling the tarp out 2 minutes before that rain gets there, and they get it out in time. That's the perfect scenario there. They play as long as they can, and then get the field covered. That way, when rain stops, they can clear it off and get back to playing baseball. So, that's probably if you want to classify one as the most fun to deal with. It's just something where you can see your work in real time and and enjoy it that way. So.
Okay, and now I remembered what I was going to say. So, when you got out of school, is this the direction you wanted to go into consulting, or was there another job you wanted to go toward when you had your degree? Did you want to go to the Weather Service? Did you want to go consulting, or did you end up wanting to be on television but didn't think you had it for that? What was your direction after college, and is consulting kind of like an somewhat easier way? It's not the Weather Service, but if you don't want to be on TV, this is probably like the next best thing.
One, I was never too interested in TV meteorology. Just never really suited what I wanted to do. You know, I was always more interested in the operational side of things. So I was looking at consulting, any private industry, Weather Service, all operational meteorology. It happened that the way timing worked out, and job openings went. Within a few months of graduating, I found myself with a job down here at Whether or Not, and that's where I've been 5+ years now. So it's definitely suited me well. As far as operational meteorology goes, if you want to do operational meteorology, you really can't go too wrong with either private or Weather Service. They each have their pros and cons in there, depending upon what specifically you want to do and what your ultimate goals are. But no, I mean, there's nothing too wrong with going either route. Private meteorology is the fastest growing sector in meteorology. You go from consulting companies like us to insurance companies, energy companies. There's such a wide range of things to go into. Climate change is getting to be a big deal now, obviously. It's something that you're getting a lot more money put behind, dealing with climate issues. So, that's certainly a growing sector that graduates should really be looking at.
But is that where, because a lot of meteorology, there's so many people going into meteorology, and I think in hindsight, it may not be, but it might be my opinion, that a lot of people are going into meteorology to be on television, and that isn't going to be what it is or was 5, 10, 20 years ago. And like you said, the private industry is growing. Weather Service is stagnant, and TV is what I would consider is slowly dying. So in turn, I think a lot of people that are going into this need to know private industry is probably your best chance to get a job. But if you don't want to go into private industry, you're going to be setting yourself up for disappointment. Would that be pretty much a decent aspect?
Yeah, but that's a difficult one to kind of figure out. Obviously, there's always been those studies. There's more graduates graduating meteorology degrees than there are job openings. But I've seen a couple of people state that's true in a lot of fields. Think of saw one the other day, somebody mentioning psychology majors. There's how many psychology majors graduate and actually go on to be psychologists. There's so many other things that kind of branch off from there that you end up going into. Just having a meteorology degree, a science-based degree, is enough to get you into a lot of different things. Whether it's analyzing data, whether it is truly doing meteorology. There's plenty of different smaller sectors that you can kind of fit yourself into, with a meteorology degree. Like I said, I'm not in TV. I'm not going to make a lot of comments on TV meteorology, whether it's dying or decreasing or staying steady or whatever else. But there's still plenty of people that graduate, want to go into TV and get into TV. It's just with a limited amount of jobs, you just got to make yourself stand out, and got to be sure that you're trying your hardest and reaching your goal. Just going through college and graduating with a degree is probably not going to be enough to really land that top job that you want. You're going to have to be doing internships. We're going to have to be doing job shadowing, getting into different groups, going to conferences, going to whatever you can to get your name out there and learn new things and meet new people and hope you make some inroads into what kind of sector you want to go into. So.
I agree with Jason. I mean, meteorology, there are so many different, it's kind of like IT, there are so many different fields that you can go in. You have broadcast TV, you could go into radio, internet, AccuWeather, I mean, they're doing their own network now. Consulting like Jason does, research, or even Daryl over at the Mesonet, he operates that website from the ground up and does a whole bunch with that, and he has a meteorology degree. So I mean, there are a lot of things that you can do with a meteorology field. It's like IT. There are so many. I mean, that's one of the, along with meteorology, one of the 2 interests that I may go in. And I mean, the possibilities are endless with what you want to do with it, because you could work at a school like I'm doing right now. I'm just doing like a summertime work type things. Or you could go into really anything. There are so many different fields that require IT, same with meteorology. I mean, Kansas City Royals, like Jason does, they do consulting for weather. And I mean, every outdoor sport, even indoor sporting events will kind of need that. NASCAR, that Jeff, who am I thinking of? The guy on Twitter.
Ryan Newdorf.
Yeah, the guy that he was on. Wasn't he on a few issuances ago?
No, he's not been on the show yet.
Oh, must be thinking about something else. But anyway, like I said, there's a ton of fields that you can be in. I'm just kind of looking through your LinkedIn page here, Jason. I have to ask, you were an intern at KICD and you operated a WSR 57. I gotta ask how that was, because that's some old technology.
Definitely old technology, and definitely very few people that have actually operated a WSR 57 and been able to view the radar. It's the old green screen. We did plastic overlays that you put on top of that and use colored pencils, and as the radar sweep came around and lit up the screen there, you quickly drew it out before it faded away, and you basically had push buttons that were set to your DBZ levels. So when you got into severe weather case, you would do a 30 DBZ sweep, then do a 40, then do a 50, and do all those in your different colored pencils, and ended up basically with a radar screen drawn up by hand basically there. So definitely a unique experience. It was really an outstanding one. It was actually my first day operating it was back on June 11th, 2004. Basically the tornado outbreak day in northwest Iowa. I believe Clay County up there had, I want to say it was 11 or 12 tornadoes in the county that day. So it was a record day up there, and here I was, first day on the internship, and sit down in front of the radar and start out with colored pencils and start drawing everything. We ended up with a tornado about 10, 15 miles south of the radio station there. So I literally drew a hook echo with colored pencils that day. And after the event, we went 2.5, 3 hours straight on air. And we never took a picture of the overlay when we drew out the hook echo. And of course, as you went on, you have to use a paper towel or whatever to clear off the screen so you can do the next one. So of course we have no record of it, but yeah, it's certainly an interesting thing. And every once in a while, when I hear somebody talk about a WSR 57, I can always stand up and say that, hey, I've operated one of those before. So
how did KICD get a hold of one of those?
They've had it for many years, for decades. They were actually the second radio station in the U.S. to have a radar themselves. First station was, if I remember the story correctly, was in Pennsylvania, and they only had it up 2 or 3 weeks before KICD up there got theirs. So, I was pretty close to being the first radio station with it. They took it, obviously. 57s were being phased out. The Weather Service put in, let's see, it was the 67s, and then they went to the 74s, and then went to the 88Ds. So it had been phased out, and they bought it and put it up there. Obviously, Spencer's kind of in a little bit of a radar gap there. You got Des Moines, Omaha, Sioux Falls, and Minneapolis. So that just northeast of Spencer there, the Emmett County, Iowa, Palo Alto County, Iowa area, Kossuth County, Iowa, they're all kind of in a pretty good radar gap. So it was actually a pretty good help at times, especially being able to see those low-level features. Like that day with the Webb, Iowa tornado, there wasn't any other radar that showed a hook echo, but us being 15 miles away, we had it clear as could be. So.
I like how you mentioned that radar gap, because where I'm at, I'm just west of Mason City in Clear Lake, and we are right in the middle, right on the fringes of La Crosse, Sioux Falls, Des Moines, and Minneapolis, literally on the fringe in the middle. So, and honestly, I have never heard of a radio station having a radar. Did they upgrade that to a newer system, I guess?
They actually did a conversion and made it a Doppler. It's still the same general parts, but upgraded it through loosely Barron systems to a Doppler radar there. Then they actually put the radar screen on their website and everything else. So they did that upgrade in between my first and second stints there as an intern, so had both sides of it. Dealt with it manually in the old 57 sort of mode, and then again after a kind of a Doppler upgrade there. The other week when I was on their site, I couldn't find it, so I'm not sure if it's down. Obviously, parts for a 57 are kind of hard to come by, so I'm not sure how much longer it'll stay up and operating. But yeah, it's not many radar stations have it. I don't have a good count as far as how many really do have their own weather radar. A lot of TV stations used to have their own, and I think quite a few of them are kind of going down on the wayside too. With
KCRT used to have one, but they don't use theirs anymore. I know WHO and KCCI both have their own radars literally right next to each other, even though there's a NEXRAD not too far from it, but that's another story for another day.
Well, the thing is, when he talks about radar gaps, and let's say with consulting, for example, I'm going to use an example. This may or may not be true. If you have a client in Kirksville, Missouri, which has an even worse radar gap than Northwest Iowa, there could be precipitation, but it could be virga, but according to the radar at Kansas City, which covers Kirksville, it's not falling. Does that make it hard in areas when you're trying to do it's going to rain now, whenever, if you have radar gaps, and it becomes harder to do it if you have clients in areas that have these gaps?
Yeah, and the same can be said in the winter time. You can get snow showers that are only a couple thousand feet tall. And so when your radars are all looking 10,000 plus feet, it can be snowing and the radar shows nothing. So that's definitely an interesting case, and there's several locations that deal with it. The other thing is, especially that northeast Missouri area that being used as an example, not a lot of automated observation stations up there either. So that's the other thing. If you don't have good radar coverage and you don't have a lot of surface stations, it can definitely be a challenge to figure out what exactly is going on up there. So, and that's true everywhere. And when you get into the western U.S., especially, dealing with mountains and everything else, we deal with huge radar gaps there. So it's
So when we have, I'll get it. When you're working at your station, which I saw the news story a couple of months ago, it seems like now, is it more or less you just get to sit in front of a computer all day and look at data and call people on the phone as to say, it's going to do this now, it's going to do this then, it's going to be 40 degrees now, you can't do this today, you can't do this tomorrow? Is that kind of what it is, a typical day?
in a roundabout, easy simplification way, yeah. I mean, but in general, I mean, that's what meteorology is. I mean, we're sitting in front of computers, we're looking at all the data, we're typing out forecasts, discussions, we're sending messages, we're talking on the phone to people, and that's operational meteorology in a nutshell is kind of that way anyway. So, it's a pretty typical environment. The only thing that sets you apart is what kind of clients you're dealing with and what type of thresholds they have. So, obviously, when you're dealing with some clients, they can't even take sprinkles, and some clients can't take downpours, and it all varies depending upon the work and everything else. So, every day has a challenge, and except you can manage 80 and sunny every day, but even then you're bound to wind up with something.
So it'd pretty much be like the Weather Service without issuing the watches and warnings.
Yeah, I mean, simplifying things. Like I said, I mean, it's all operational meteorology, but obviously, like we said, we're a lot more on a client-by-client basis. Weather Service is a general public sort of situation. They're let you know when there's a chance of rain and when about it's going to occur. We're dealing with clients wanting to know when the rain starts, how heavy it is, how long it's going to last, if there's going to be an hour dry break or not, and all the specifics there. So, general everyday person, that's why they don't hire consulting meteorologists, but any company that deals with weather and whether or not weather affects their business and their budget there, that's where a consulting meteorologist comes in.
Now, I know you published, I think in February 2012, a paper in the AMS journal. Do you kind of want to talk about that?
Well, that was actually a branch off of a senior thesis back in Iowa State days. Worked with Storm Prediction Center and a couple other undergrad and graduate students. Basically, we did a pretty comprehensive roundabout paper on climatology of significant tornadoes. So we dealt with a lot of the data, digging into significant tornado days, what type of synoptic features are present, all the way down to your overall environment there. So yeah, I think that was would have been 3.5 years worth of work to finally get it published in the journal there. So a lot of work, a lot of different people, and this day is still a pretty widely referenced paper as far as climatology and significant tornadoes go. So,
what was the peer review for that?
I honestly didn't deal a lot with the peer review because I wasn't a lead author on it. I was just a co-author. So, friends down at SPC got to deal with all of the peer review stuff and editing and making adjustments and resubmitting and all that fun stuff.
So how did you so it was part of your senior thesis, but how did they at SPC kind of get involved with it?
It's actually was work with Jeremy Grahams, who works on SPC, was an Iowa State grad, and so he was looking for graduate help to work on this project. And it fits well into a senior thesis there, so I took part of that on to do a senior thesis, and it delved into their work with that up at SBC too. So just kind of all worked out in the end to be a nice senior thesis that grew into a published paper. So.
Would you think about doing any more of that type stuff, even though you're now well out of school? Would you do any more type of papers, even at AMS, or going to these conferences like the one next week up in Ankeny, or say the NWA meeting down in Oklahoma City, or AMS, which I think next year's in New Orleans?
Yeah, and actually finishing up some brief research this week to actually present next Saturday at the Severe Storms Doppler Radar Conference there in Ankeny. Kind of stuck with a similar scenario, but looking at climatology of significant hail across the Central Plains. So kind of a similar thing, looking at analyze soundings, analyze profiles, and gathering data from all of them, and seeing if you can make some checklist sort of things, typically to see your significant hail, if you need stability values above so high, how your shear instability kind of work out. I've seen just in some of the initial stuff, it's funny to look at things like cumulative temperatures and see what the temperature was when that hail fell. Obviously a lot of it you'd expect to see 70s, 80s, but there was a day back in 2003, I want to say, where we had a cumulative surface temperature was 40 degrees. So, I mean, there's definitely some unique things. It's always neat to look back and see what you can past events. I'm a big proponent of using analog forecasts as well, so things like that kind of fit into an aspect of meteorology that you can kind of work at and look into, try to help improve forecasts and understanding of things for the future. So.
Now he had to say the word analog, because this is where Jason and I got into a little tussle many years ago about when I was looking at analogs and thinking, oh my gosh, it could be something like this. I don't remember when it was, but this was years ago. And I very rarely look at analogs, but sometimes I do if I'm not quite sure. But if people, because analogs can be seen publicly if you know where to look. But I think it's mainly for people that know what they're looking for and not for public use, because you can't show this to the public and they'll say, oh my God, it's going to be just like that, because it's not. It's just, it may be similar. So, but yeah, analogs can be trouble if they're in the wrong hands.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was just last year, maybe it was 2 years ago, we dealt with the whole case of one of the analogs that showed up on a severe weather day was May 3rd, 99. So immediately you get the big response of, oh, it could be another May 3rd and everything else, which, yeah, it can be, but at the same time, there's so many small details that go into developing a May 3rd, 1999 that an analog isn't necessarily going to catch up on. When you look at analogs, typically you're looking at synoptic type features. So, your patterns, your overall temperatures, what you have for vorticity, maxima coming across, all sorts of those sort of things. You're not dealing with outflow boundaries and storm cell interactions and all that other fun stuff that can kind of lead to more significant events and things like that. So, analogs are good.
Go ahead.
Analogs are good for looking at, like I said, those synoptic features and getting a hindsight of what possibilities are. But by no means could you necessarily pick out one day in there and say, oh, hey, it's going to be like this day. That's why when I usually use a lot of analogs, I like to use that probability function, because that kind of takes into account your top 15, your top 25 analogs, and how many of them had a certain event in that area, so you can kind of get a good understanding of what the likelihood of a certain scenario happening.
Yeah, see, I've never really liked analogs that much just because there is so much that can influence a severe weather event. And I mean, especially with some dimwits on Twitter that feel like posting, oh, this event is beginning to look like X and X and better be prepared. And I mean, that I've never really liked the aspect of comparing events or via analog because I mean that's just unnecessarily freaking people out when it may not necessarily turn out that way because there are so many little details that go into severe weather that can change. And I mean that will probably go into our next topic that Jeff and I talked about yesterday. But
Oh no. Is this the Mike Smith thing?
I'm just going to get comments on it. I'm not going to. I want to ask what you think of a specific article here, and you can respond as you like. But what do you think of this article about a 6-hour tornado forecast? I know it was causing a ruckus on Twitter between a certain SPC employee and a certain AccuWeather employee, but what are your thoughts on this article if you
I mean, you have to look at it from a private weather standpoint, in that it's essentially a marketing piece. So you're always going to look at the good events in a marketing piece. Calling it specifically a tornado forecast, may be a stretch. And obviously, you're looking at updraft helicity values, which are commonly modeled thing now when you're looking at HRRR or even your higher resolution WRF forecasts. There's something that you can go and you can look at them even on SBC's storm scale ensemble has those sort of features as well. Essentially, it's showing areas where it thinks you're going to see significant rotation within a storm. Obviously, a tornado deals with a little more detail than whether or not your storm's rotating. So, can it signify where a tornado may happen? Yes. As far as calling it a 6-hour lead time on a tornado, you can call it that. At the same time, and I'm sure they understand it just like everybody else does in the meteorology field, that the next time something like that happens, you see a similar forecast from the model like that. May or may not form a tornado. It may or may not be right there. The next event it could be 50 miles off west or east or north, and so it's just another tool to use. Like I said, I mean, you got to look at it from a marketing piece. You're not gonna say that, yeah, we had this 6-hour lead time here, but we also had 5 false alarms and 3 other events where it was off by 50 plus miles. I mean,
yeah, the thing that I didn't really agree with was the fact that they were pretty much just using updraft helicity alone to call that a tornado forecast, and for another piece, it's on one specific storm, and I mean they're comparing it to the HRRR, and I mean I see where you're coming from a marketing aspect, and it just kind of turned me the wrong way yesterday because I really didn't think much of it honestly because for one I'd like to see more. I mean if they had higher rates of this being accurate, I would be more interested in it. But this is one storm, and 2 they're using just updraft helicity, and I don't know. I know people will have their own opinions on it, and I know a certain SPC employee surely voiced his opinion about it on Twitter, but beyond that, I won't be discussing that farther. Jeff, what do you have for us? Anything?
I would ask our guest Jason, where does he see consulting meteorologists going? We have certified consulting meteorologists, CCMs. Is that where it, in this case, well, if we're going to have consulting meteorologists like Jason, should they be certified? And are clients going to go to places that have a lot of certified? It may not be all of them certified, or because some could be better than others. Do you see, is that where it's probably going? That the clients are going to want to go to places that know what they're doing and not other places that may not know what they're doing?
Well, one thing, I mean, the certified consulting meteorologist tag, it's essentially think of it as similar to the AMS NWA seal that you see for broadcasters. It's essentially just a signification that you've spent X number of years in the field. You've basically taken a test that certifies that you know what you're talking about when you're dealing with certain cases of weather. The main thing that CCMs are used for is typically your legal sort of cases. So, when you're dealing with black ice issues, slip and fall sort of scenarios, more complicated matters, with something that Iowa sees a lot is the farmer sprays his field and it's too windy and it drifts across and kills something else. You can end up going to court over something like that, and then you typically deal with a CCM coming in and saying that the wind was this direction, this speed, given where that was, you can expect it to flow that way. So yes or no, it's possible that that caused that damage and everything else like that. So CCMs, as far as if you're just going to be a consulting meteorologist or work in the private industry, probably isn't a necessity. Obviously, it's something that if you wanted to go for, and after you've spent that good number of years in the field, and if you kind of have a strength in a certain aspect of it, and you want to do it, by all means, you can go for it. It's certainly not cheap either. It's a decent amount of money to get that certificate and keep it every year and everything like that too. So, but it's something that you can look at and in the field. But as far as everybody in the private industry trying to go towards something like that, it's probably not going to happen.
So, now that Henry wants to have an earthquake, so where do you see yourself in, say, 5-10 years? Do you still see yourself doing consulting? Do you see yourself branching out into another part of the meteorology field?
Right now, certainly enjoy consulting. Like I said, get to deal with all sorts of interesting aspects of the weather. Still haven't gone away from love of operational meteorology. Obviously, it's hard to say where the weather industry in general will be in another 5-10 years too. So we just got to keep up with the pace of what's going on with use of social media, use of new data, all the new technologies. And obviously, your computer models are getting better, getting faster. The use of ensembles to create forecasts, everything else. It's something that I certainly try to keep up on all the latest and greatest things, and certainly hoping that it just helps you steer towards a successful career somewhere. So.
As long as you're still in the business, at least until your youngest is out of high school.
As long as I have a job until I can retire, basically.
Well, you still have a long way for that.
Exactly. I always wish I could retire at 40 or so, but
yeah,
that maybe just can handle that one. So.
But being that you're younger than I am, since I'm in my almost mid-30s, God forbid I'm almost old, I mean, at 50, 60, can you literally see, and there's been some talk that a lot of stuff's going to get automated, and there'll be very few people around. is that kind of concerning that the consulting people may not be needed, the Weather Service may not be needed, and there's going to be a lot less people that are going to be quality controlling the stuff, the data that's coming in.
I mean, you can go clear back to 80s and 90s where we started coming out with all the new higher res computer models, which at that time there were 120 kilometer grids, and them saying that, a few more upgrades and we don't need meteorologists anymore, because the computer model will tell us what's going on. And now here we are running 3 kilometer models, and we're pretty sure we still need meteorologists because those models aren't always correct and don't always have all the details needed. So, in time things can certainly become more automated. If I could predict the future of the meteorology field, obviously I could know exactly what I need to get into and probably be able to write myself some pretty big checks. But at this point, it's just gonna, like I said, keep up with all the latest and greatest and go with where the field's kind of going there. So, I mean, at this point, I certainly don't see meteorologists and meteorology becoming obsolete by any means in the near future there. So.
Now, before we go to our shout-outs, I'm gonna ask Jason who his favorite professor was, and if he doesn't say it was Dr. Gallus, then I'm gonna get Dr. Gallus after him.
Favorite professor at Iowa State? Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty good toss-up. Dr. Gallus also had Dave Flory up there, was a great professor. Got me started in programming, which I still use quite a bit to this day. Computer programming has been a big help in getting things done. So, yeah, definitely those two up there. So.
Yeah, he didn't want to pick one because he knows he'd see Dr. Gallus up there next Friday and Saturday.
Probably see both of them.
Yeah. So anyway, we'll do our shout-outs now. We can shout out any person, place, thing, meeting, a book, or anything that may or may not be related to weather or whatever. So, Henry, do you want to start?
I'll shout out the NWA 40th meeting. That will be in October that Jeff and I probably will be going to. I hope that the hotel's nice, because paying a lot for that hotel, and it better be a...
Oh God, Henry's ranting about the hotel again.
I'm just saying, I'm paying like, I think with the upgraded suite that we're getting, it's like $800 for the entire thing. So I'm just saying, it better be a...
You do not need an upgraded suite.
I don't know. I can't... We need to be luxurious while we're there, because it isn't going to be around here for... I think the next one's in Charleston, and then...
No, the next one they don't... In 2016, they don't know, but it supposedly is going to be in Charlotte, we think.
Or Charlotte, my bad. Sorry.
That's not confirmed, but that's the hint. In 2016.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not going to be back for a few years, because I'm guessing the next year it will go far away too.
So supposedly, from what I've heard, NWA is going to be doing their annual meetings in Oklahoma City at least every 4 or 5 years.
Well, until the next one comes, we're going to be living in style, dude. We got to have our swagger. We got to have our nice car.
Oh, good grief.
We got to get a real nice... I tried to get him a Dodge...
No.
When we go down there, but apparently the rental car company...
No, I know what we'll do. We'll drive to Jason's house and take his car.
Oh, I'm sure he has a real nice car.
Nice little Chevy Impala, so nothing fancy.
Yeah, but he also has to take all his kids all over the place, so he has to have a big car. So yeah, since I'll do mine. Oh gosh, I don't know what to do now because I was going to do one and I can't remember what I want to do. Because Henry took the NWA meeting, so I'm gonna shout out the AMS meeting in New Orleans in 2016, which I'm not going to because AMS is expensive. as all heck. But New Orleans, they a good place. I think AMS has been there before, maybe I don't remember, but
are you a member of AMS, Jason?
I'm a member of both, and actually on committees for both too. So.
Oh, we could get deals.
Fancy.
I don't get any deals. So.
Do you go to the meetings every year, Jason?
Have not been to an AMS meeting since 2008. Actually, when it was in New Orleans last time. So.
But when was the last NWA meeting?
I have never actually made it to an annual meeting for NWA, not a national one.
Yeah, but when it's going to be so close as in Oklahoma City, it's like a hop, skip, and a jump. So, but I'll shout out the AMS in 2016. I mean, they have their AMS schedule out till like 2030 or something. I'm thinking, good grief, is AMS still going to be around in 2030? So, Jason, it's your turn to shout out anybody, any person, any colleagues, co-workers, people you don't like, stuff like that.
Well, I'll keep the conference theme going. A shout out to the Severe Storms Doppler Radar Conference, which is next Thursday through Saturday, so the 26th and the 28th up there in Ankeny, Iowa. You can still register for it, and it's right there at a hotel. Stay right there. Always plenty of good folks coming in. I know I got people from SBC that'll be there. Plenty of Weather Service folks will be there. Always a place to see undergrad and graduate students showcase work and everything else. I'll be there, so that's always a positive, right? So give a shout out to that. And then can't do things and not thank the wife for allowing me to take time out and do things. They're up in Iowa this week, but I'm here at home holding down the fort and getting various things done around the house where the house is quiet, and finishing up research for the conference next week, which if I didn't have a couple hours to do that, I don't know when I'd find time. I'd have to be staying up 24/7 to get something accomplished. So.
So Jason's all by himself. Oh, there's going to be trouble. There'll be a party at the house tonight.
Working every day and then finishing up the research. So my party is sitting in front of a computer screen.
I'll ask this as a question. Is it hard to juggle the job when your hours are all crazy with your wife and your 3 kids? Is it hard to juggle it? Because at the rate you're going, you're not going to have that hair long.
No, or at least going to turn gray, which wife thinks she's finding a couple, so it's getting closer. But yeah, I mean, especially when you start working odd times, you work till 1 or 2 in the morning, and then the 5-year-old's up at 6 a.m. Or the same token, I'm up at 3 or 3:30 in the morning, and then got to get home and somehow manage to stay awake through supper time and everything else too. So certainly be some long days and everything else in there, but just have to fit in naps when you can.
Don't tell me you did your job early this morning and then you've been up, because then it would look like you've been up 24 hours or something.
No, not today. I've only been up only 6 a.m. today, so not doing too bad.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's all I have right now, Henry. If you have anything else, we can close it out.
I think we can close it out. It was a good episode. I got my pizza waiting over here and gonna enjoy my night in front of the computer screen. That's my kind of party, alright. Upcoming guests, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 upcoming guests. Next week we'll have John Wheeler on from WDAY and WDAZ in North Dakota, and then Tim Marshall will be on from Texas. Who I like how he's listed as a multitasker, Jeff, in our spreadsheet.
Yeah, and this is where we want to have no severe weather because Tim Marshall is like big time. And before we go, and I'd have to mention this with Jason. How was it working with Tim Samaras before he tragically was killed in El Reno?
Yeah, amazing experience. Dealing with Tim's probably one of the smartest guys. Probably is one of the smartest guys I've ever met. And same can be said for pretty much everybody that's met him. Obviously, an engineer by trade, but passion for meteorology was as strong or stronger than anybody else's. So if there's anything that needed to be researched, needed to be built, needed to be done, I mean, he was a guy that would look forward to getting it done. So it was great 3 years spent enjoying with them, and even after graduating and not being involved in Twistex, still spoke with him online and everything else every once in a while, and him and as well as his son and Carl Young too. So all three great people. It's certainly a sad thing that we had to lose them, and I have to believe that with as many years as all of them had left to do research and study, that they would have done even some greater things than what they were able to accomplish in that short time. And so.
Yeah, because it made me think when Henry went through the guest tonight, we had Tim Marshall, who's pretty much almost like Samaras in hindsight. It made me think of it, and I didn't want to get off the episode before we got to it.
Beyond Tim Marshall, we have Tom Coombs from WBND in Indiana, and then the 17th is open. 23rd we'll have Fred. I'm trying to say his last name.
Gossage.
I always think Gosage, which is not right, but he's from WBRC, does some severe weather analysis, volunteer work down there. In Alabama, we'll have Eric Wilhelm from WFMJ in Ohio. The 8th has question marks across it.
That would be May 8th. I have that blocked off for now.
Okay, and then Jeff Baskin on the May 15th from KLRT in Arkansas. That will get us to episode 59 on May 15th. And beyond that, we don't have anything. Contact information. You can contact us at info@iawx.net. You can like us on Facebook, /Iowa Weather. You know what to do, or look us up, Iowa Weather Network. We're on Twitter, Iowa WX Network, Google plus Iowa WX. I'm trying to remember all of these. Jeff, you can find him at Iowa WX. Email him at iowawx@gmail.com. You can contact me. I'm on Twitter at henrycluker_WX. You can email me at henry@iawx.net. Jason, how can they contact you?
Yeah, I'm always on Twitter, so at Severe Plains there. SeverePlains.com is the website. Find email address, all other ways to contact me there. So, two best ways.
Alrighty, Jeff, do you have anything else for us tonight?
No.
Alrighty,
we could wish Jason a happy, very belated birthday, but I already did that when his birthday went past, I think, in February.
Well, that is all we have for tonight. Thank you, Jason, for being on. This was Polygon episode 51 on this Wednesday, March 18th, 2015. Have a great night, everybody, and God bless.